Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Alison Dale, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hi, honey bunnies. Welcome to your weekly forecast for October 7th to 13th, 2024. I hope you're doing okay out there as the interesting times that Confucius promised us all continue to unfurl before our eyes. I have been feeling incredibly overwhelmed with it all myself over the past week, facing insomnia and digestive upsets and teeth grinding, sinking into a lot of grief, so much grief that I'm witnessing in the world. Last week was rough. I just didn't really quite know what was going on with me, but everything felt so much. And I was took a moment to lay down on my bed and it just hit me oh yeah, the whole world, everything. It's not just me. As I record this, though, I'm lucky enough to be sitting outside at a ponderosa cabin in northern New Mexico with the sun warming my back, and I'm staring at a giant cliff face of the Brazos Mountains. The rocky crags are so grounding, and they are helping me find stillness and breath amidst the frenzy of the news cycle and everything that's going on. I do feel just incredibly blessed to be able to be in this place with so many people out there not having access to safety at this current moment. This episode is all about facing our fears, tuning into our bodies and our intuitions, and finding clarity amidst a pervasive unease. It's called Facing Our Fears with Intuition and Compassion. So thanks so much for tuning in. This week in the cycle of time, I'll get to this right off the bat. The highlights are the moon is waxing, growing toward our first lunation out of an incredibly intense eclipse season. So we're still technically in eclipse season until the full moon in Aries next week, which is our first moon outside of the eclipse window. So we're still in it. We're still in the muck and the mire a little bit, but the moon is waxing toward that full moon. And then on Friday of this week, Pluto is stationing direct in Capricorn, and that is for its final jaunt through the sign of the sea goat before entering Aquarius for the next 20 years. Pluto was in Aquarius, dipped in earlier this year, and then retrograded back into Capricorn. So now this outer planet, Lord of the Underworld, is going direct again in Capricorn, headed straight for the age of Aquarius, if you will. So we have the final reckoning of Capricorn, which I'll talk a little bit about here, starting on Friday. And then in the human design and I Ching and Gene Keys wheel from Monday today through Sunday, we are in gate 57, which is the gate of intuition. This week's themes are facing your fear beast, paying attention to your intuitive hits, and trusting what insights come to you through the gentle winds. Our place in the wheel of the year, we are in the medicine wheel direction west, which represents water and adulthood and emotionality in the indigenous medicine wheel. In the Wuxing 5-phase cycle, the Taoist element cycle, we're in the element of metal. That is the element of the autumn season. In the pagan season, we're in Mabon, which was the equinox celebration. And then in Zodiac, we're in Libra from September 22nd to October 22nd. And like I mentioned, the I Ching hexagram and human design gate is 57, which is known as wind over wind, or the gate of intuition. So start out with Yeah, the eclipse aftermath. I am recording this late Sunday night. I normally record it a couple days before, earlier in the week, just so I can have some time to edit and, gather the resources and all that kind of stuff. But I am putting this off till the 11th hour because it's just been such an intense week emotionally and just trying to think about how to exist. So all this time in the mountains where I am has really helped with that. And I feel a sense of rejuvenation now that it's Sunday night, just being around the wisdom of the natural world. And over the course of the past week, though, I have been just in the depths of the eclipse exhaustion. I've been so exhausted and so much has been shed like snake skin. I just found a snake skin, or my daughter found a snake skin next to a little pond, and it felt so appropriate because it's the season of shedding skins, it feels like. And later on we saw the snake swimming around in the water in the pond amongst the weeds and moss. I feel like so much has risen to the surface as well, and whatever silt that was at the bottom of the bottle has kind of been reshaken and stirred up, and the waters are muddy. So seeing this little water snake and its freshly shed skin next to this muddy pond felt just like such an appropriate symbol for how I was feeling all week. I don't know about you, but I know I'm not alone in this. It's this beautiful golden hour season of the year, and there's this kind of heavenly golden light of the aspens and the cottonwoods here in northern New Mexico. And yet the eclipses and the seasonal transitions to it getting chillier and darker, the darkness creeping in earlier and earlier each evening, and the grief and existential dread about climate change, while cities and homes and businesses devastated by Helen and other global storms, plus the 1-year anniversary of an expanding genocide in the Middle East, are certainly making the start to October feel just incredibly heavy. I've mentioned the term spooky season before, and this time of year does have a certain weight to it always, but this year, gosh, there's a lot to contend with. Right now, I'm feeling incredibly moved by stories of hope and mutual aid and people showing up to help their neighbors and showing just remarkable acts of kindness and compassion amidst such widespread devastation. I heard that this hurricane, Helene, by the time this releases tomorrow, there's another hurricane headed for Florida, Milton. So, these hurricanes, but this last one in particular, I've heard it's like 100x Katrina, and that's hard to say, but it definitely, I'm just, seeing the ripple effects, and it's a lot. Several months ago, I became kind of strangely obsessed with Asheville, and I've never been there. I have a couple of friends who live there, old friends, but nobody close to me really. But a little while ago, like a few months ago, I had this intuitive hit that I needed to check out Asheville and that part of the world, Western North Carolina, but Asheville specifically. I was doing some research into my astrocartography, and my Venus line in astrocartography runs right through Asheville. So there was just this certain call based on that a little bit, but I just started looking at all of the amazing businesses and artists and herbalists and schools and teachers and healers that live there. And I started looking into going to graduate school there, as they have great schools of herbalism and Chinese medicine. So I recently, within the past few months, started researching and following everyone there that I could on Instagram. And there's just so many inspiring and amazing artists, healers, herbalists, earth-based guides who live there. And I actually had a trip planned to check it out, and had booked tickets for October 14th. So I would have been there this week. And because of this recent deep dive of mine into the city, now every time I open up social media, I'm seeing stories of resilience and courage and empathic action taking like being taken by the rooted and connected people who call that part of the country home. So, without that impulse and, gut hit to start following all of these accounts, I would have, been hearing probably a lot more mainstream media coverage about this, but seeing it through the perspective of a lot of just amazing, incredible people who I admire and follow for a reason, I'm able to see the ground level of just the deep, deep courage and the deep heartfeltness and the deep empathy, and just so inspiring what can happen and what can transpire in the wake of something so horrific. It's definitely beautiful, and it reminds me of all of the community care that I saw on the ground after Hurricane Katrina, when the federal government was nowhere to be found, really, and the overculture and media coverage was focusing on the heathens and the looters in New Orleans. I was going into my senior year in college in New Orleans when Katrina hit, and I had just arrived back after a summer of traveling around, and I remember it, like it was yesterday. Just moved into a new house, and within a couple of days, I went out to dinner with some friends who worked at the zoo, actually, the Audubon Zoo, and everybody had been a little bit hesitant about, it doesn't look so bad. I'd gone through many, many hurricanes during my time in New Orleans, and kind of the anticipation of what's going to happen is always a bit, it's just, you have to kind of be on your toes with that. And I remember going to dinner, with some people that worked at the zoo, and they said that the animals were all starting to really freak out, and the penguins and the elephants and the birds and everything. And so they were making a move to evacuate. And so I left in the middle of the night, was lucky enough to find a ride in the middle of the night to North Carolina. And I watched the flood and the devastation of Katrina from a small TV on my friend's family farm in Western North Carolina. And so I'm having a lot of really deep kind of emotional connection to the feeling of, I wasn't there. I almost got stuck there because my phone was out of batteries and the power had gone out, and I had a flight out the next day, but I wouldn't have been able to get a cab to the airport, and also the flights that I was going to take to evacuate from New Orleans didn't end up leaving because they stopped flying empty planes. The airline stopped flying empty planes into New Orleans at that point because they wanted to save money, apparently. So there's a lot that's just coming up about that time, and it's been a long time, but I still think about it every August, and every hurricane that comes through, I have a very deep sentiment in my heart about what that feels like to to lose everything to a flood, to be so uncertain about what is happening, and to not feel supported by not only the government, but also by people from other parts of the country who don't really understand the intricacies of what it means to live in a place that is natural disaster central, which is kind of everywhere now, let's be real. So anyway, kind of rambling. But yeah, I'm just having a lot of Katrina flashbacks and hearing comparisons to Katrina here and there. And when we were allowed to return to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, when they opened the city back up, I spent the aftermath of the storm, the floods, helping a friend of mine who is a contractor gut and rebuild houses of people who had lost everything. So we just went into a lot of houses and helped them take out everything that had been destroyed by the flood, and also kind of rebuild brick walls and, that kind of thing. And it was the hardest work I've ever done in my life. I remember pulling out old records and sequin Mardi Gras ball dresses and family photo albums kind of out of the soggy wreckage of people's houses while they stood by and cried. And I, had just moved into a new house, and so didn't have a ton of damage. A lot of my stuff was still packed up and in boxes. And so, I was a college kid. I didn't have much, but looking at, the amount of history and heirlooms and just generations of memories that I was looking at, pulling this out of houses, it was just something that I will never, for my body will never forget that feeling. And the way that the media and a lot of the rest of the world were making assumptions and judgments and kind of moralistic denouncements at that time, post-Katrina, about the people who lived in New Orleans instead of being compassionate to their situation, is another thing that my body will never forget. There was a lot of people, just saying, well, why would people choose to live below sea level anyway, even though Amsterdam's below sea level? There's a lot of places that are coastal, and there are ways to adapt to a lot of living in a lot of types of places. But there was a lot of moralizing and a lot of kind of questioning of like the fabric of that place in the first place, and it just felt so bad to hear that from kind of people watching from the outside in. But I also will never forget in my body the way people came together to form ad hoc mutual aid organizations for community care in that time. And I was part of an organization called the Katrina Warriors Network that was a group of small organizations and teachers and caregivers of all kinds, essentially, who were coming together and forming means of support and accepting donations and accepting volunteers and help. And nothing was an organized 501c3 nonprofit. It was like the way the help and support came together so quickly was based on immediate need. And I didn't know the term mutual aid at the time, but that's what was happening. And it was just a beautiful thing to be a part of and to witness how that happened. And that was actually kind of the inspiration for starting the company that I founded in the Bay Area that helped nonprofits with online fundraising, Flipcause, that I worked on for about a decade. And it came from that place of knowing that there needed to be kind of an all-in-one plug-and-play platform for helping gather community resources together, because I saw it happening, but it was also kind of hard to communicate and do the tech piece in a post-disaster environment. So anyway, I am going off, but yeah, this week has been like, I was just, the teeth grinding, the insomnia, like just feeling so out of sorts, and kind of having this wondering why, right? But it's, the body keeps the score, and we're in these splenic gates in human design right now, like I mentioned last week, for the next 5 weeks, and we've already been through a couple of the gates, but we are in this splenic, intuitive, instinctual awareness type of energy right now, and also the time of year where we're going inward. And so it is easy to kind of flip that back around on ourselves, like I mentioned last week, to kind of flip judgments back on ourselves rather than using judgments for kind of a larger scale societal things. And so all very relevant, all very, it's all right here. But, looking back on Katrina, I know that it was a bad storm, but it was only a Category 3. And we know now that it wasn't actually the storm that caused most of the destruction in New Orleans and the Gulf Coast, but it was the lack of care by the government ultimately, and the disrepair of the levees by the federal agencies that were supposed to maintain them. And also, Katrina was, a lot of people in New Orleans don't call it the storm or the hurricane, they call it the flood, because what really drowned the city was a flood, and it wouldn't have happened if they hadn't been cutting major shipping canals through the poor neighborhoods of the city for years and years and years to facilitate the faster transport of oil from the Gulf. And there was one canal called Mr. Go, which was the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet Canal, that was criticized a lot after Hurricane Katrina and was shut down in 2009 due to this criticism about how it negatively impacted the city it kind of acted like a funnel from the Mississippi. It eroded the wetlands a lot, and it acted like a funnel, causing major storm surge amplification during Katrina and flooding the Ninth Ward neighborhood, the predominantly Black Ninth Ward neighborhood. And that was why that area got flooded. It wasn't because of a huge storm. And so, many people might not know this, but definitely paying attention years after the storm to what other factors were included. So, like many people are emphasizing right now, these storms that are happening are not biblical. A lot of people are using the biblical analogy as if they're made by God, but they're very much made by man. And the storms themselves, are made by the negligence of the fossil fuel industry and the world's governments about the obvious threats of increasing climate disasters for so many years. We've known this is happening, but it's always put off for the sake of profit and continuing the fossil fuel regime. So that's that. And then also, the infrastructure of cities is also based on this, capitalist profit-based motives. So I could go on, but I am just dwelling on this to say that, the larger picture of increasing global ocean temperatures should make us all realize that there is nowhere to run from climate change. And there's no safe haven that is exempt from the threat of losing everything. And so there should be no moral judgments about people who, quote unquote, choose to live in disaster zones, because everywhere is a potential disaster zone. And this, along with the prioritization of spending our tax dollars on expansionism and the military-industrial complex, while the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, is running out of money. I've been just seeing memes going around where last week the U.S. sent $8.7 billion to Israel at the exact same time that FEMA declared a $9 billion deficit. So it was almost two on the nose, and there's a lot of stuff flying around right now. Don't get me wrong. A lot of rumors, a lot of hearsay, a lot of accusations, a lot of conspiracy theories. But the truth at the baseline is that we are, by continuing to exacerbate wars and ignore the very real reality of a global warming Earth, it's all interconnected, and we can't keep turning a blind eye to what is happening, because it's happening not just here in the U.S., obviously, but all over the world. And on my Astrosomatics Substack, I posted a video of kind of a montage of all of the flooding and fires and natural and man-made disasters that are happening all over the world right now. So, check that out. It's hard to watch, but it's very real, and it's happening all over the place. The large-scale emissions from the wars themselves are causing the climate change, and all of this just, I think we're reaching this critical mass where it has to stop. And I think many people are collectively waking up across the globe and realizing that their priorities need to shift, and that we are experiencing Mother Earth's response to a culmination of hundreds of years of choices and decisions made by men, driven by greed. And it just keeps continuing on as people on the ground are dying, and those who make it aren't getting resources that they need. My friend Lenny, who also lived in New Orleans during Katrina, hi Lenny if you're listening, she recently wrote, "These catastrophic hurricanes are revealing the shame of the country it's been hiding and unwilling to metabolize." So yeah, it brings it all to the surface, literally. You see, debris floating, and that is kind of a similar thing. There's just what is coming up to the surface of these muddy waters. there are so many places that are suffering right now, and it's kind of hard to comprehend what to do with this level of devastation. But I truly believe that every kind gesture, every compassionate outreach has far-reaching ripple effects. So if you have the means and are interested in helping, I suggest following Mutual Aid Disaster Relief on Instagram or checking out mutualaiddisasterrelief.com. Or I just made a donation at belovedasheville.com. They're an organization that seems to be getting a lot of resources and money to the places that need them in Asheville. And I would also, beyond donating and doing what you can to send support to these areas that are so badly hit, I would also be remiss if I didn't say that although the current administration does not have an incredible track record, I'm still going to be voting for Kamala in a month. It's only a month away till the elections, so at this juncture in time, for me, it's anyone but Trump, as I'm certain that he and his party, and whatever transpires to that party after the fact, would make moves to exacerbate the climate crisis and destroy long-term environmental and human success. So voting is not going to solve our polycrisis by any means, but it's a stopgap so that we can continue doing the work on the ground post-November. So that's my opinion. I'm not like a huge vote, get at the vote person per se. But I believe that we have to choose the better option at this point because, it could get worse and it might get worse. So anyway, onward we go. Astrologically, getting off my soapbox a little bit, Pluto is stationing direct in Capricorn this week, which I mentioned, and is going to be heading back through the last degrees of the sea goat for a final hurrah before he enters Aquarius for the next 20 years. Pluto is the planet of the underworld, the planet of kind of revealing the darkness and the depths and the muck and the mire. I'm into that phrase right now. But, everything, the riches that are hidden beneath in that muck and that mire, but also the darkness and the depths themselves. So for the past 15 years, Pluto has been in Capricorn, a sign that represents hierarchies and structures like governments and corporations. And Pluto is also, at these late degrees of Capricorn, Pluto is also wrapping up his return to the place in the sky where he was when the United States was formed. It takes 288 years for Pluto to orbit around the sun and through the entire zodiac. So Pluto is last in the final degrees of Capricorn when the Declaration of Independence was signed back in 1776. So, for those of you who haven't heard of it, we are in the United States Pluto return, and that's kind of like the Saturn return in a person's life, where Saturn comes back to the same place in the sky where it was when you were born, which happens around age 28, 29, and then again about 28, 29 years later. And so with this United States Pluto return, it's kind of indicating this this reckoning, if you will, this kind of, coming back to the place of how it began, and with a lot of new information that's gathered over the course of that entire orbit, right? And so this Pluto return, Pluto isn't afraid to tear apart the most complex systems that we have built up from the inside out. And themes of metamorphosis and evolution and transmutation are foretold to be ripe during these times. So here we are. In November, right after the U.S. presidential election, Pluto will transit into Aquarius, where he will transit through the sign of Aquarius for the next 20 years. But before then, we are definitely in a deep unearthing of the foundations and the holes in the social structures and hierarchies that we have come to rely on and accept as normal in the United States. So this is not only an unearthing of the foundations of the government per se, and of the corporate structures, and of these things, but also those things within ourselves, the structures and hierarchies that we have built up inside ourselves. And there's a big dismantling happening right now, where we can feel the shift towards, fake news, right? What's real, what's not real? Who do I look to? Who do I trust? And it is this deep reckoning of kind of like, oh wow, we're being in Capricorn, this sign that is about building up structures, and it's Saturnian ruled, and so it's kind of about the boundaries that we have, and a lot of that is just kind of being eroded and having a light shone into the darkness right now. And this could all sound scary, for sure, for those unfamiliar with the Pluto return narrative. But I believe it's a profound framing and reframing for the opportunities we have to face our fears and see clearly. We have the potential to no longer be shrouded by disinformation and misinformation and denial and dependency on unjust systems. And this is not an easy road to walk, but there are tools to help us through. And you all know this already, but the only way out is through. So Facing the Fear Beast is the original title of this episode, and moving into the gate of intuition. Last week, I talked about using the spinny spiral eye emoji a bunch in my text conversations, and that definitely continued through this week, but it's subsiding. And what's replacing the kind of nebulosity, at least for me, is a phrase, and the phrase is facing the fear beast. Last week, the sun was moving through the gate of depth, reminding us that we're being challenged right now to face our fears, to look down into the deep wells of our subconscious and the wells of our emotions and our belief systems and our ancestry, and to find the glimmer of light at the bottom of the well and send a bucket deep down into the well, have the bravery to do so, to pull up whatever resources are within us to get us through these truly revolutionary times. We're being called forward to activate our gifts and move with intention and learn how to question the limiting beliefs and habits that keep us stuck in false comfort without letting that questioning destroy our self-compassion. So Facing the Fear Beast, that phrase, is an art project created for Burning Man 2022 by the amazing late artist Tigre Marshall-Lively and their team of collaborators here in Santa Fe. I supported their Kickstarter when it was being built, and I received a Fear Beast hoodie as a perk, which I promptly lost in the back of my closet and wondered where it had gone. But last week I was digging around and cleaning up my closet, and I found it hiding back there. And it was just the perfect cozy garment to take for a hike up in the Aspens. And so I wore it tromping through the trees on the day of the eclipse last week, and I was moved by the potency of its message during the week of depth. From the Kickstarter description, Facing the Fear Beast is a large-scale interactive work. It's huge. It's this massive sculpture that's, probably like 30 feet tall and 50 feet long or something like that. 60 feet long, maybe. I'll have to check on dimensions, but it's a massive, massive sculpture. So there's some pictures of it on my Substack, but you can also look up Facing the Fear Beast. But it's basically a large-scale interactive artwork that depicts a small, brave child facing up against a hulking nightmare known as the Fear Beast. 35 feet long and 16 feet high. The Fear Beast is a chimeric monster full of teeth and claws and spines. The child that faces this beast stands with courage, compassion, and dignity, seeing past the monster to the inner child trapped within, representing the wounds and traumas that often manifest through our most destructive and harmful behaviors. So it's this sculpture of a small child, and then a kind of parallel sculpture of the small child inside this fear beast's mouth. Spec Guy of the Burning Man Journal writes, "Facing the fear beast contains nuanced layers of meaning that aren't immediately obvious upon the first encounter. From afar, the massive fear beast invokes a dark and menacing feeling, amplified by an audio soundtrack of negative statements projected at the small child facing it. You are worthless. To alter the tone, you must stand with the child. This triggers a change in the lighting and sound, revealing the fear beast's own inner child, which begins to glow as the dialogue shifts to positive messages. I believe in you. It isn't simply about good versus evil, beast versus child. Rather, it highlights that within the beast, there is a wounded inner child that is often the source of destructive and damaging words and actions. Through empathy and community, we have the power to shift our personal narrative and heal wounded conditioning, quieting the cycle of pain." So this has come up so prominently, facing the fears, to stare down into the well. And I thought it was just so fitting to have found that hoodie, that sweatshirt last week. And I've just really worn it with like a sense of, it's been a shroud of comfort. As I've worked through a lot of internal processes with all of this stuff. So the work of the shaman in many cultures is to intentionally stare down this fear beast, to look deep into the well of their own and of their community's subconscious. And since prehistoric times, cave art has been created deep within underground caverns as a parallel to the caverns and wells and vortexes that we must travel in our minds in order to find that glimmer of truth and find these profoundly powerful resources that lie within us. So beautiful, beautiful imagery, beautiful metaphor, and it's a scary sculpture. It looks deliberately very scary, to show like this isn't a joke. This isn't something that's just, oh, face your fears, peace sign. But it's like, no, there's some really deep stuff there. As I mentioned in last week's episode, the next 5 weeks find us in splenic territory as the sun transits through the end of Libra season and into Scorpio and touches 7 human design gates in a row that are located in the body's energy center known as the spleen. So the energy of spooky season focuses on our most primal organ, the spleen, whose task it is to filter your blood, to recognize and remove old, malformed, or damaged red blood cells. And likewise, this time in the wheel of the year is ripe for filtering the stories we tell ourselves, removing and recognizing old, malformed, or damaged stories. And so I think it's just, we're going through a deep filtration right now. In medieval times, the spleen was thought to be the literal physical source of a hot temper. And so that's also come up, just feeling like angry, right? about everything that's going on, all the injustices that's pervasive right now. And back in medieval times, people thought that venting their spleens would remove excess anger. So perhaps this season, with all that we're dealing with on the collective stage, a little conscious splenic venting isn't a bad idea. In Chinese medicine, the emotion of the spleen is worry. And this works in 2 ways. Excessive worrying damages the spleen, and a deficient spleen can also weaken the mind and make us more susceptible to emotions like worry. So feeling anger and frustration and venting it, hopefully in non-permanently destructive ways, but providing a vent for anger and frustration, could be a good way to prevent ourselves from sliding into a seasonal depression or obsessive worry or incapacitating fear. Venting is another way of saying, in my mind, telling new stories. And those could be stories based on facing our fear beasts and putting ourselves at the center of our own narratives and giving ourselves and our inner children main character energy and love and compassion. Appropriately, this week, the sun is transiting through the gate of intuition, which is a splenic Libra gate that guides us from unease to clarity through the path of intuition. Its hexagram in the I Ching are wind over wind, and it's known as spreading or gentle penetration in the I Ching. The I Ching website iFate describes Gate 57 like this: like gentle wind wafting through a village, hexagram number 57 suggests a time of influence and change. This is a time when clarity and truth can pierce through the veils of illusion. Through earnestness and a sense of great, quiet peace, you can penetrate the hearts of those around you and spread goodwill and prosperity. This is a time to speak up and let your voice permeate the land. Communicate your wants and needs to those you love. The key here is to be gentle but continual with the expression of your dreams and wishes. Your will has incredible power to spread at this time. Be heard. Be true to yourself. Wind over wind. It's so cool when you have these double trigrams next to each other, because we're going through every possible combination of the 8 different trigrams, and that's what the I Ching is made up of to form the 64 hexagrams. But when the two come together, wind over wind or fire over fire or mountain over mountain, I find myself paying special attention to these gates because they feel potent, double trouble. And so Wind Over Wind Divination Foundation is another website that does I Ching readings, and I liked this description of it here as well. They say, a subtle penetrating effect is like a soft wind blowing through reeds that are bending gracefully, demonstrating flexibility and endurance. This symbolizes a quiet, relaxed effectiveness in action. A gentle influence is at work, but just as the wind can be ceaseless in its efforts, small forces can add up to produce lasting results. Gentle penetration bodes well for new relationships or enterprises. Just as a summer breeze slowly penetrates the woods to cool the forest, the ideas of gifted leaders slowly reach and sink into the minds and hearts of people. In personal relationships, a gentle beginning can lead to a long-lasting union. When using a force that is soft but persistent, careful aim is necessary, for only when a small force continually moves in the same direction will it have a cumulative effect. In human affairs, this kind of soft influence comes more through strength of character than by direct confrontation or active seduction. It's important to have and stick to clearly defined goals. Maintaining a strong vision and following a steady course of least resistance will bring good fortune. Gentle penetration. It's an interesting combination of words here coming from the I Ching, and it's interesting for me, especially because for those of you human design heads out there, I'm a projector, and projectors are said to have penetrating auras, where manifestors have kind of closed or repelling auras, and generators have enveloping, warm, welcoming auras. Projectors have penetrating auras, where you kind of just like get into somebody's auric field and you kind of pay direct attention and focus to them, which can feel kind of intense if it's not welcomed in, which is why the strategy of a projector is to wait for the invitation to welcome in that penetration. And so, yeah, I was thinking about that. I've been talking to some other projector friends of mine lately, and kind of going deep, especially other 5/1 projectors who are like super triple projectors, and thinking about what that means to have a penetrating aura or kind of an intensity or a focus when it comes to social dynamics. And I've been wanting myself to lean into gentleness. The word gentleness came up a lot before I read any of this interpretation. I had no idea that gentle penetration was another name for the gate of intuition. Would have never put that together. But funnily enough, yeah, I was out to dinner with another 5/1 projector friend of mine, my 5-year-old bestie. I've known Seth for like 35 years, and we were talking to each other about some things that have happened in our social realms, and just realizing, a lot of similarities and commonalities there. And I was kind of just making a vow to myself in this week of exhaustion to just approach everything with a little bit more gentleness and not as much intensity. But then I kind of had a moment where I backed up and said, well, if I stop persisting and being, and researching and being, aiming for my desires, right? Then what even am I? How can I get what I want, or how can I impact the world in the way I want? And what I loved reading this, finding out that gentle penetration was the name of this week's gate in the I Ching, was that it is about that subtlety and that continuity, and that gentleness does not mean weakness at all. It definitely just requires a certain focus, an aim, a goal to continue to make an impact subtly over time. It can't be spread out. If it's going to be like, the wind and make an impact, it has to be kind of like, well, this is where I want to bend those reeds. I'm not going to blow all over the mountain. This is the part where I'm going to bend those reeds. So that's my personal anecdote surrounding that. But I just thought it was so strange that these gentle penetration words came together. It's almost just strange to say, but I like it. Moving on from that, in the Gene Keys, Gate 57 is the path of the shadow is unease, and the gift is intuition, and the city is clarity. So Gate 57 highlights our capacity to perceive and act upon the quiet inner voice or feeling that often knows the truth without rational explanation. So this is our intuition. It suggests that intuition serves as a crucial tool for protection, offering guidance and ensuring that we remain true to our path. So intuition is, less rational, less intellect-based, and more based in the heart and the spleen and the gut and the other organs of our body. And it's also firmly anchored in the present moment intuition, much like an animal instinctively sensing danger, or that feeling of love that you feel when you're around someone so dear to you. There is no future or past in the realm of intuition. It's only the immediate now. And this immediacy underscores intuition's role as a direct and powerful sense, which guides us to make decisions and react based on the present realities, and that ensures our alignment with the most authentic and safe-paced path forward. So this week is about kind of using that intuitive sense to know where to focus your energy, and then just continuing to do it gently, softly. In the 64 Ways, Richard Rudd writes, when we one day begin to truly turn inward through contemplation, meditation, or some other form, we first of all must meet this deep discomfort and unease that's been driving us. We have to turn and face it, which takes courage because we can easily distract ourselves. We don't really want to keep looking at this difficult place. The more we become aware of it, the more it seems to dominate. It's not a comfortable feeling. Nonetheless, the transformational way through this gene key has to tackle the unease. Face the fear beast, if you will. If we're working with gene keys, every shadow we dive into is really diving into this unease. However, it's rewarding work, this mining. We'll begin to find some gems if we persist. Shadow work is hard, but it gradually begins to lighten our load. The unease doesn't go away, but moving into it with conscious awareness prevents us from being a victim of it and chasing our tails in the outer world. So this phrase, this quote here reminded me a lot of both Pluto in Capricorn, Pluto being a focus of this week as it moves into direct in Capricorn. There is this certain shadow work with Pluto too, right? It's like the lord of the underworld, but also Hades is the lord of gold and like the depth, the riches that are found in the underworld. And so it's about finding gems through persisting into the darkness and not turning back, or not just stopping before we start because it looks too scary. He continues, occasionally, if we're lucky or predestined, we meet someone unusual who seems to have transformed their unease entirely in their being. We call these people masters. There's an aura around them, a radiance, a sense of peace that some distant part of us remembers. We know what it was like to live without this unease. Imagine it for a moment. Your body with no unease. These people are electrifying to us. We want to know how they did it. How did they transmute this unease? Of course, we want that for ourselves. It's a huge turning point when we realize that it is possible. That's really what this shadow is all about. Getting to the heart of the matter, burrowing deeply into the form, which holds this germ of our suffering. Richard Rudd calls it the sacred wound, and it's a wound with many layers to it. The deeper our awareness penetrates this place inside, the more layers we discover, and the more layers we transmute. This is the journey, and it's why we're here. If we know this, then we're blessed. When we know this, our journey has truly begun in earnest. So we've probably all heard that quote, the wound is where the light gets in. And I think this is, this journey from feeling unease in our bodies to feeling clarity about what it is, who we are, or what we must do, what our purpose is, comes only through the path of intuition. And it can't be something that we logically decide, but it's the path of opening up our hearts to the present moment and feeling the true feelings of what is entering us, letting other beings, letting feelings enter us. And the quote, the wound is where the light gets in, is how I have heard it, but it's actually a Rumi poem that goes like this. It says, I said, what about my eyes? He said, keep them on the road. I said, what about my passion? He said, keep it burning. I said, what about my heart? He said, tell me what you hold inside it. I said, pain and sorrow. He said, stay with it. The wound is the place where the light enters you. So beautiful. Stay with it. I will echo that. Stay with it. Stay with it. Richard Rudd also says, clarity is a new world. With clarity, there is no I. Clarity can't exist with a sense of identification. To get to the heart of the matter, we must let go of all that we've ever known. Our intuition will take us finally to a precipice in consciousness. So this week, give your overworked brain a little break, and your overworked doom scroll fingers too. I see you. I am you. But take this week of intuition and gentle penetration and clarity to tap into your heart and your gut too, your spleen. Tap into your deep capacity for compassion and for intuitive knowing. And it's not always easy, because unease is what comes to the surface first when we start to do that, and we start to look down into our deep wells, and when we start to stare into our own fear beasts. I think unease might surface first, and it probably will. It does for me. But a little bit deeper down, if we stay with it, like Rumi said, we can tap into a very deep capacity for a heart-centered intuition. As Pluto makes its final foray through Capricorn, and as the sun transits through the gate of intuition, remember the power of consistent and gentle persistence in actions toward the world that you envision. This is not a time of rapid exertion or even obvious forward momentum, but like the falling leaves of the season, it's a time to stop clinging to old comforts and to take baby steps toward embodying a new tomorrow. All the love this week, my friends. I'll talk to you next week as we celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday, along with the Gate of Continuity, which has a lot to do with ancestors, which is so fitting for Indigenous Peoples Day. And it's also the full moon in Aries next week, and so we'll talk about that. As always, if you find value in this labor of love that I do every week, please share it with a friend, or follow me on Instagram at astro.somatics or Cycles of Time podcast, or click the heart below to like the post, or even better, leave me a little comment Doesn't have to be anything profound, just like, hi, what's up? It's just nice to know you're out there. It's been fun seeing a growing audience and seeing this shared around, and just hope that it's bringing you a little bit of something to think about and to contemplate as the seasons change. So thanks so much for listening. It really means a lot to me that you're here, and I'll see you next Monday. Bye.